Hi, welcome to Murf+E Unfiltered Zero BS Biz Talk. I'm Kathleen Murphy, and I'm here with my guest co-host today, Len Bruskiewitz. How are you, Len?
I'm great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you. Managing to get through the summer.
Exactly. A little warm, but it's been great.
Exactly. A little bit too rainy for me. Well, I'll just set up context-wise just to give the audience a little information about how we know each other, because I think this topic is on point with what we're going to be discussing today, which is the fact that we used to work together, Elliot, you and myself, at Constant Contact a number of years ago,
Yes.
And we've remained in touch. And Elliot was at a different engagement today, so thank you for standing in as my co-host today. I'm delighted to have you here.
Great, I'm happy to be here, and I'll try and uphold Elliot's level of professionalism.
I'm sure he'll appreciate that, and I know that you'll do a fantastic job. So today we're going to talk about the subject of who do you surround yourself with, and the overview for this particular story relates to you've heard of the saying before, which suggests that who you associate with can define who you are or limit or increase your chances for opportunities in your life professionally. Is this happening to you one way or the other? And so when I think about when I was young and who I was hanging around with, I probably really wasn't truthfully giving much thought to the people that I was selecting to spend my time with. In fact, when I was really young, it was probably driven more by the people that were living in my neighborhood, because I could only associate with those people that I could walk to their house to go and spend time with them, if you will. But then after I got to a point when I was in high school, I was maybe a little bit more deliberative in terms of who I was spending my time with. But I think that a lot of times people will sometimes use as an excuse timing and life circumstances to dictate who and who they can't spend their time with, and I don't necessarily subscribe to that, so I don't want people to necessarily use that as an excuse, because I think that it's always important to constantly be aware of perhaps broadening who you spend your time with, regardless of your situations that you are in. And I always think that it's an excuse for people maybe not to meet new people because of circumstances or timing. And I always say, no, that's not gonna fly in my world. But Len, you grew up outside of New England, so I'm curious to get your take in terms of, I know what it was like for Elliot and myself, who grew up in New England, to meet people, and we didn't necessarily think too much about that. But coming from the outside and then moving to this part of the country, I'm curious to get your take in terms of how you went about meeting people when you moved here, and what that was like.
Yeah, so I think it started earlier, right? When I was a kid, it was absolutely, as you said, proximity. I had another factor that helped, which was I grew up. My parents ran a small business, so it was what you'd call today networking.
Yes.
I was exposed to it at a very young age.
Oh, great.
So those networking events were, church festivals,
Sure.
things like that. But it was unacceptable for me to not look people in the eye, not shake hands, and not carry on a more adult-like conversation.
Right.
So I think that prepared me very early on.
Oh, I would say that's fantastic. You were very lucky that was the case. Were you the type of person when you went off to college that continued in the spirit of that kind of networking, if you will, or a way about going to meet people?
I did. So I was coming 1,000 miles east for college. So I as much as there was one or two people I knew from my high school, it was proximity. It
Sure.
was the people I lived with in the dorms. So
Right.
that's where it started, the people I had class with.
Right.
And so you're forced into that. And I was had to take a bus from campus to my dorm. And that bus ride was, 101 in, hi, what's your name? What's your major? Where are you from?
Exactly.
But getting past that was where you started to build those relationships. And it came down to, what do you have in common?
And so did you go about widening your circle of friends beyond the people that you just customarily were in proximity with? Did you ever make a conscious effort to go about trying to find other people to meet when you were in college?
Certainly. So I was exposed to a number of different groups, both academically and extracurricularly. So that forced me to not just stay in one grouping or one tight band. So there were, the tight band, and then that outer band, and then the people that didn't really fit any band, but sometimes, had the greatest value of getting different perspectives and building different relationships.
Did you intentionally think about how you chose your friends at that time? I think I would say I believe around college was when I started to perhaps intentionally think about who I was spending my time with. Was that something that you gave thought to?
I don't think so. I think it tended to be more, proximity and shared interest, which are the common, common kind of reasons. I think it was later in my professional life where I started to develop, started to realize, gee, I need to be kind of conscious about this.
Right. For me, back in high school, so going back many years, the people that I probably associated with the most were people that I had things in common with. I played sports. I played soccer and lacrosse, so that certainly gave me something to do, and it gave me a circle of people to spend time with because you're with them quite frequently. But then I also, outside of the sports, would spend time with people that were, again, people that had common interests that I did, such as we liked similar music, for example, or we liked going to sporting events to cheer on our friends. But then when I went off to college, I took a different path because I wasn't playing sports, so I had to go about figuring out how I was going to meet people in an entirely different way, both organically and maybe through some other methods. So I joined a fraternity and became a little sister, and we were talking about that earlier, just in terms of how that was one way that I developed a different sort of group of friends, because we had a common sort of passion in terms of doing community service, and quite a few of the people in the fraternity that I was in were associated with sports, so I had that in common with them, so I understood what it was like to be an athlete, and so it was kind of fun in that way. But I also had a friend that I met in college, and her name was Ellen O'Brien, and she didn't go to college with me, but I became friends with her through another friend of mine, and they worked together. And Ellen was an aspiring, at that time, jazz singer. And she was the type of friend that, like, I would wish everybody would have an Ellen O'Brien in their life. Mm-hmm. She's gone on to become a renowned jazz singer. She lives in New York City, and she's just an incredibly talented person. But the thing that I liked about Ellen was the fact that I think she was probably one of the first persons that, when I think back to who I associated with, that had so little in common with me. So I don't know if you had somebody like that in your life, and like when I would think about the list of what did we actually have in common, there's probably more things we didn't have in common, mm-hmm. But I don't think that's such a bad thing, because I think it helps to balance you in your life when you have somebody like that in your life. So was there an Ellen O'Brien in your life?
Maybe not to that extreme, but yes, And this is something I definitely learned later on, was to reach outside of your comfort zone, sure. Because it's the only way to grow and kind of extend your capabilities.
Absolutely.
If you just keep hanging around with the same people who have all the same interests.
Exactly.
So having an Ellen, I think, is awesome, just to make sure you broaden your horizons. And it's also maybe somebody that doesn't agree with you.
That's right.
In everything, whereas your tight circle of friends tends to be pretty, homogenous.
Right. So sometimes having someone that's a doppelganger that looks like you and acts like you isn't necessarily always the best approach, both personally or professionally. And we'll get into talking about that a little bit more. Were there certain characteristics at some point that you sought out in people, perhaps, that you wanted to include in your network of friends or associates?
Yeah, I think what I've really tried to focus on, again, I think I developed this after college, was to break it down. I want a healthy mix of cheerleaders and critics. Right?
I like that.
You want people that are going to kind of support you no matter what. That's mm-hmm. family. That's your
right.
close friends, and people in your workplace that are kind of encouraging. But you also want people to kind of keep you in line.
Right.
Not that they want to put you down, mm-hmm. but they are honest with you, right? And have you had those same kind of things where it's, you you choose people for kind of sometimes what they can bring to you that may not be so positive.
Very, very definitely. And I was talking to somebody about this the other day in terms of, I like this expression that is, there are people in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And the person that I happened to be talking to, I said, well, that person was clearly in my lifetime category of people. But when I start thinking about the people that I've associated with or intentionally seek out strategically to get to know, I am seeking them out for different reasons, and there are different characteristics of their personalities or perhaps professionally what they do that are going to either be in strong alignment with what I do, or maybe in some cases in opposition, because I think that, to your point earlier, it's good to associate with people that are going to have a different point of view than you are, especially professionally, because I think that's the only way to increase your game, up your game, if you will, if somebody is pushing you or makes you think about things quite differently. And do you happen to have like a tip off the top of your head in terms of when you are searching out to find somebody to meet, or like how to meet them or how to associate them and bring them into your circle?
Yeah, my take has always been, and again, I think early in my career, I decided it was, everybody above me, and learned pretty quickly on that it's all levels of people that can help you succeed. Absolutely. And that you can help succeed. And, there are plenty of examples I can point to at Constant Contact where it was somebody who, organizationally was not high up, but had more power than people levels and levels above them. And so I always tended to seek out people just that I liked.
Sure.
And people that I could help, because those things come back around.
They absolutely do.
It wasn't so. Once I kind of got that, it was never about level to me.
Right.
It was more about, can they help me with something? Can I help them with something?
I really love the spirit of that thinking, and I think that that's really critically important to point out, to have people be blind to the title of a person in an organization, because although somebody might have a high-ranking title, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be able to help you in any way or that they want to. And in fact, it is going to be people perhaps that will surprise you the most that, to your point, are the people that are junior and coming up. And I think to have a balance and a mix is really important. So I have some tips to share with people in terms of how to go about figuring out the best methods for how to associate with bringing those right people into your personal or professional life. And the first tip is to think of yourself as a gardener. So for those people that might have that as a skill or have no clue about gardening, I think this is an analogy that most people can probably tend to relate to. And one of the main things that they need to do is to obviously be conscious of growing their garden. And pruning their garden is one of the things that they do. And it's important to do this pruning both personally and professionally, to pruning as in taking certain people out of your garden of life, professionally or personally, because you don't always need them in there to help you grow. Another one is to think consciously about whether you have some kind of a criterion for how you go about evaluating whether you're going to have somebody in your circle of your professional or personal life. And then again, there are people certainly that are toxic, that are in our lives, and sometimes they are in our lives a little bit too long and we're not sure of how to get rid of them. So I think it's important to be mindful of those toxic people that we might have in our life, and if we're having challenges with trying to figure out how to maybe prune them out, to seek help to do that as well. And then another one is to consider the current circle of the people that are influencing you in your life. They may be the right people and contributing to advancing your career or your life in some way, or maybe holding you back. And it's good to be mindful of which direction that could be. And then to think about whether in fact those people are having a positive or negative impact on your life. And then the last one here is to look around, whether physically or mentally, and to see if you're in a place where you want to be maybe for the rest of your life. I'm not the kind of person that is the static type of person, and I love just constant sameness. If anything, I like constant change. I'm one of those people that always is seeking out doing things differently. But I think it's important to have a plan in mind in terms of how to have a growth mindset. So what about any other tips that you might have, Len, in terms of how to go about developing your network and who you
I think
choose to
I think
hang
those are
around
great
with?
tips. The one I can think of is sometimes reach out when you don't need something
Yes.
from your network, right?
I like that.
And it sometimes ends up being just phenomenal conversations.
That's right.
And it just shows, look, I'm not always calling you because I need something. It could be I'm calling you, maybe I can help you with something, or maybe not, and maybe we just catch up.
That's right, exactly.
But that to me is such, I think it's a lost art.
I
We
agree.
tend to reach out when we need something rather than just to reach out. So
I-
that would be my one tip I would
I
add.
really like that advice. I think that's spot on and like incredibly sage, because you don't want to be that person where someone sees your text come through, that phone call coming through, and gosh, I haven't talked to this person in 6 years, but I know exactly why they're reaching out to me, right? I'm the kind of person that will practice staying in touch with people for no reason other than just to say hello, and to your point, the lost art of conversing with somebody. Yep. So I've got some more tips, and the next one is to have people think about whether they've settled into interacting with ease of associating with people, and are they practicing that lost art of conversation. I think that's critical. And then, are they motivated to seek out new people to include in their life? Are there things holding you back potentially from being motivated to find new people to associate with? Because I think it's really important to going about doing that. And then, what methods do they typically apply to develop their circle of influencers, or just the people that they have in their life? I know during the pandemic, I really appreciated the fact that we had a technology such as Zoom, where we could continue to reach out to one another despite the fact that we may not be able to see one another in person. You could still engage with people, and I found that worked almost just as well in certain instances. So I don't want to give people the excuse of saying, well, just because maybe you're not comfortable with Zoom, not to use that, or that you don't have to use it anymore because we're sort of coming out of the pandemic. Keep using it is what I tell people. It's much easier that way. And then, having outstanding people in our lives can be enriching in so many different ways, and including them in our life is much better for our health, both physically and mentally. So have you tried perhaps any of the suggestions that I've listed?
I have. I mean, I, like everybody else, had to Zoom and do non-in-person. I thought from maintaining relationships, it was fine. I think I struggled with it as a way to have initial conversations and build relationships. It just felt awkward. It just didn't feel natural. It just seems better if you're having a cup of coffee or at a trade show, So I definitely, agree that it was necessary, but it was not optimal for those initial conversations and kind of building up a network. It was better for maintaining.
Do you think that there are any of the suggestions that I made that are a little bit advanced and that might be harder for some people to apply, or perhaps conversely, ones that are easier to apply?
Yeah, I think have you settled or not? I think it's a tough one, because I would imagine that most people think they haven't settled, but I think they probably more than likely have, right? It's easy to get into a routine. It's hard to reach out to new people, especially if they are a level or two above you or in a different industry. That's hard, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So I would say, expanding your network beyond your comfort zone is one that's pretty hard to do.
Pretty hard to do.
That would be one that I think, takes concerted effort and some skill.
What about an easy one? What's a layup? What's an easy shot?
Oh.
Or maybe you have another one in mind.
I think an easy one is going back to our constant contact days, keeping a healthy relationship with your network is easier than starting a new one. So
Sure.
nurturing the ones you have, I think, is a layup.
I like that. I like that a lot. So you've tried a number of the suggestions, and I like the spirit of the fact that you're suggesting that you should maintain your network. I think a lot of people forget sometimes that they've worked probably many years to develop their network. Even if they've only been in the workforce a few years, they've still put effort into getting to know people, and they should really be mindful of keeping that going. And I think that it's really important for people to potentially also think about maybe architecting certain people into their life and being intentional about that. You talked about sometimes it can be intimidating for people to think about reaching up to people at a different level they are, or perhaps that are in a different industry. But if you just think of them, and I tell my kids this all the time, just think of them as people. Don't think of them as the title that they are or the experience that they have. They've probably been in your shoes at some point. So when you're mindful of that, I think it can take a lot of the stress and pressure away of reaching out to talk to people. I'm working on a project right now where I'm way out of my comfort zone in some cases, because I'm talking to people that I never imagined that I'd be talking to. Talking about people that are coaches, sports coaches in the NFL, the NBA, the NBL, and you know, why do I have any business talking to them? But when I reached out to them to ask them if they would talk to me, they all said yes. So I love the fact that I pushed myself outside my comfort zone to reach out to them, because there was a 50-50 chance that they would say yes. And 100% of them said yes. So I think it's a great example of me, especially, I'm not in my 20s, certainly, pushing myself out of my comfort zone to continue to build my network. Have you done anything like that that sort of scares yourself in terms of continuing to push?
Sure, and I think, you know, credit to you.
Thank you.
But even if you didn't hit 100%, big
Right,
deal,
exactly.
right? Like, what's the worst?
So what?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. They said no.
Yep.
Next.
Yep.
Right?
My challenge is actually kind of not going the other way, but just a very different. So I've joined a startup where I'm the oldest person by a significant amount. And so to me, I clearly have a job to do, which is, you know, running a program. But I'm also seeing as this is a chance to give back, right?
That's right.
The founders are super smart, but they're 3 years out of college, right?
Right.
So I just see this as a great opportunity for me to kind of give back to the next generation, and not that I'm going to share my wisdom, but I can share a lot of my experiences and be able to
Absolutely.
say, I've seen this before. You know,
Exactly.
here are the pitfalls.
And I think that's so wonderful, because I think a lot of people that are in our decade of life sometimes are intimidated, oddly, by the younger people, or they feel like, oh, they're going to steal my information, or they're not going to be interested in my information. I think you have to take yourself out of that kind of thinking and have the approach that you have, which is you're going to be offering information to them to perhaps steer them in a better direction. But if they don't want to listen, that's okay too. Not to take offense. I don't think there's any offense that should be taken. But I think some people can get reverse sort of intimidation in working with people that are a lot younger than they are. And conversely, younger people having some intimidation working with people that are older than them. If they simply just look at them as people and as resources and potentially as allies, they're going to be so much better off, as we've both discovered in life, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It was the kind of thing where you had to take a little bit of a leap, right? We both did,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Do I want to bring in somebody who's quite a bit older? Do I want to work for somebody who's quite a bit younger? And
Right.
It's been a great experience. We're both learning. We're both growing.
I love that.
It's been amazing.
I love that. Well, I can't believe we're at the end of our show here, and this has been so much fun. I appreciate you coming on board and filling in like you have, and I'm sure you'll be back. I hope you'll come back.
I certainly will.
And I want to thank everybody today for joining us. Come back again soon and see us at Murf+E Unfiltered, Zero BS Biz Talk. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll have plenty of more shows for you coming up. So take care. Thanks, Len.
Thanks.